Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today with us. For those who don't know me, I'm Chiara Ciampi, member of EG Webinars team. So just a few words before starting. Today, I have the pleasure of moderating this day, an event which is organized by EG members for EG members. As we have reached the end of the second semester, European Guanxi wanted to create where members participants and not just recipients. So big thanks goes to those of you who submitted their works. The Thesis Day had the pleasure of reading all of them, and we appreciate all your proposals. They were all valuable. So we promise we will try to make new occasions and to give you the space that you deserve. And of course, we are here open to any suggestions and ideas for future events. So anything that will aid us in our commitment towards active participation. So we can start. Again, please turn your mic off. Presentation, each speaker will be given 10 minutes to answer questions. So for any question, just the box. Please write to me if you want to question directly or if you want me to post the question. So now we can start. I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker, Gustavo Álvarez. Gustavo is a student soon to be graduating in international relations and global communication. He hopes to build a professional career in government relations, and his thesis focuses on the ideological interaction between Western liberal democracies and the PRC. Specifically, his work analyzes that theories are necessary for a socio-political mutual understanding concept framework, so as to provide an overall perspective on the elements that unite and separate them through a political, social, and cultural deconstruction process. So, Gustavo, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm gonna go share the screen first. All right, so I think here it is. And I go like this, and I think it's sharing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, basically this is what I'm gonna do. First, thank you for the presentation. Thank you, European Guanxi, for also this allowing us to present our works and our thesis, and also thank you for the people here listening at this time in the morning, which is a Saturday, and I'm thankful for it because you're giving us your time. And so first of all, I'm gonna go with the first round, and my work focuses, as Gara has just introduced, in sociopolitical mutual understanding. And what brings us today here is kind of the middle, like in a way, the middle ground between Western liberal democracies and the People's Republic of China. So first, I'm gonna go with the index, right? First, and here we're gonna present a little bit of context, a little bit of problem solution, just to go quickly through it. Then I'm gonna go with the sociopolitical mutual understanding framework. Let's see the elements that we need to build it. Then we're gonna go with the sociopolitical mutual understanding analysis too, just to see the different parts of the sociopolitical mutual understanding framework, and how to apply it to this specific analysis between Western liberal democracies and the People's Republic of China. And finally, I'm gonna give 2-3 ideas just to keep you in mind once this presentation is over. So first, I'm gonna go with the context, right? As we all know, in a way, in the last decades, both Western liberal democracies, more or less represented by the United States, and in Europe, we can also say that there's some of them in Latin America, Chile, Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, and then in South Africa. But to People's Republic of China, they are politically confronted. Most of Western liberal democracies are in an economic downturn. They're, like, in a way, falling, we could say. They're losing weight in the international system. And in comparison to them, China is growing. China is growing so fast that his economy now is worth more than 14 trillions. And 2019, 6%. So we see how this confrontation is emerging, because there's a group of countries, very powerful countries, going down, and there's China who's rising. So in this process of going down and rising, they just met up in the middle point, and they are politically confronted. And as we have seen, and a good example of it in the last year was the trade war, the so-called trade war between the United States and China. But then on the other side, this is quite interesting because they are politically confronted, but they are economically tied. They're economically tied through trade, because as we all know, we live in an interconnected and interdependent economic world. So in terms of political understanding, there's almost no social understanding. So given this context, and given the fact that when it comes to a crisis, only having economic ties makes countries' relations kind of weaker, I decided, and I was wondering if there is a way, right, to analyze sociopolitical understanding, because given this context that both Western liberal democracies and the People's Republic of China need to understand each other, as we have seen with the COVID crisis. There were some moments of tension, there were some moments of some difficult moments, some challenges, some challenging situations that they have to go through. And if they would be able to understand each other before those crises, apart and aside from having economic ties, it would have been much easier, it would have been more organic, right? So I was thinking if there is a way to analyze sociopolitical mutual understanding, to see those elements that we need to focus on to improve, and also to see those elements that we need to focus on, and also to work on it to make them better. So to create a sociopolitical mutual understanding, we need three elements. So the first of all is the live world, Jürgen Habermas. And in the live world, he creates and he analyzes human interaction, right? And he does an amazing work of establishing three sub-worlds. So there's the live world. This is very abstract, right? But there's like a live world, and there's three worlds: the objective world, the social world, and the subjective world. Then I'm gonna go through it, because I used Habermas and I applied it to, instead of the interaction between people, the interaction between ideas and between countries. Then the second one is the second element is the deconstruction by Jacques Derrida. And this element is very important because the construction is basically a way of reading and a way of writing texts, and it's based on trying to find this, how we could say, try to find these contradictions, try to find these points where like ideas clash and where ideas start to become a little bit contradictory. So I cannot show how the construction works, but at the end I will give my contact and also my email in case you want to read the paper, and you'll see how the construction works. And finally, the third element, this is very important, is methodological contextualism, which is a branch of a brand new branch made by John Tilley 2-3 years ago of cultural relativism. And this is very, very, very important because methodological contextualism allows us, or in a way kind of forces to never leave the cultural framework in order to explain a country, explain a political system, a social political system, only with the theories that they use themselves, right? To only the theories that they use to describe themselves. This is very important because you always have to respect how someone describe him or herself or itself to actually understand them. So we're gonna go with the socio-political framework, right? So socio-political mutual understanding. This is a framework, right? This is a little bit maybe complicated, but it's not that. So as you can see, there's two worlds: live world A on the left, live world B on the right. And each live world, right, it has a concept A, concept B. In this case, we could say that concept A is Western liberal democracies, that I would use WLD as an abbreviation. And then concept B, we could say that is the People's Republic of China. Then from the concept, there's two worlds, right? The objective world and the social world. They are more or less interdependent. Objective worlds are for political theories, and social worlds are for the role of the individual towards the state. And finally, within the live world. As you can see, there's two square boxes, which are the subjective world A, subjective world B, which basically would be subjective world are experience, which when it comes to states experience, we could say that the experience of the states is the culture. And finally, we have the bridges and the breaks, which is basically the elements that bring them, bridges that brings them together, and breaks that tear them apart. And I was wondering, how can I connect these two worlds? Is there a way, because when it comes to when we have different cultures, how we can compare different ideas, how we can understand how ideas interact, because this is what socio-political mutual understanding is about. So I came up with a deconstruction and say, let's put the main ideas from the different worlds and try to confront them, try to write as much as I can, as accurate as I can, and try to find contradictions to see the clashing points, and in the end, find out where are the breaches and where are the breaks. So first, we're gonna go with the objective war, right? Which is basically, as I said, political theories. So on the left, we have Western liberal democracies and the people, and on the right, People's Republic of China. Western liberal democracies, we have this idea, right? The representative democracy, which is the in a way the modern shape of liberal democracy. And currently, I find out through the deconstruction process that representative democracy right now has the monopoly of democracy. This is very interesting because it seems along all the texts and also along the academia and also within the media, that representative democracy is the only correct or is the only valid way of democracy. And it should not be that way, or at least it should not be that way, because I found out that this has two main cons, which is basically the first one, that is a static concept. Whenever you're monopolizing something, you're becoming it static. There's no competition, so you cannot evolve, right? This representative democracy gets isolated and basically gets isolated in time, and it's counterproductive because we cannot improve it. It cannot be improved from ideas from outside because they are not democracy. And also ideas from within the representative democracy are also not valid, because if they are not representatively democratic themselves, they cannot be part of it. So whenever we have a different idea to change maybe a little bit of representative democracy, we could not do it because it is static and because it's monopolized. And then on the right, we have the People's Republic of China, which basically uses neo-authoritarianism, which is a transition step between authoritarianism and democracy. This was a Shanghai school of thought in the 80s that started to think about it. And they came up with this, I could say, inclusive way of understanding democracy, which is try to put it in a timeline, right? And see that democracy is maybe not only the state, or it's maybe not only the attachment of for example, with Western liberal democracies, the attachment of representation to democracy itself, to the concept of democracy, but it's in a way this evolution of going from authoritarianism, then a middle step of neo-authoritarianism, which is we're not a democracy. We're still not a democratic country, but we want to, right? We have this willingness to become a democratic country, and in the end, we have democracy. So this is kind of like an inclusive timeline that it acknowledges the fact that democracies don't emerge like that. They have to go through a transition process. Then I'm gonna go again. So just to refresh the image, we're gonna go with the social world as it is highlighted there. Social world, this is very interesting. The role of the individual towards the state, right? So this is basically how individuals act toward the state based on the interpretation of the state about this individuals, right? So Western liberal democracies have this, basically it's liberalism, and it comes to a very interesting way of understanding people, because it first kind of like give the natural rights, right? Because you're human, I give you rights, so I make you independent. And I go person by person, which make you individually autonomous, right? This is basically on individual autonomy. We all have our rights, we all have our freedoms. We behave on our way to end up doing whatever we want. And Western liberal democracies have gone from a free market, from a very liberal free market, to the nationalization of some of the economic parts of the state, and we see that with the welfare state, with the welfare system. For example, here in Spain and many countries in Europe, health insurance is covered by the state, for example, or education. But then with the People's Republic of China, they have the socialism with Chinese characteristics, which is basically approaching the individual as a production force, right? As a productive force. And it's basically, instead of giving you this more human, this more right approach, I'll give you this economic approach, right? So towards the state, you have an economic role, which in the end, you have it as a country, and it makes you collectively autonomous. You're not individually autonomous because you belong to the collective, but so you are collectively autonomous. And this has gone like the other way. So because they have gone from a state market economy to a lot of economic openness that we have seen with the 14.5 countries, they just have surpassed the US in the last year. And what I found out basically here is that no matter the way you understand the individual, in the end, more or less, you have a similar result, right? Different understandings of the individual, but in the end, the shape and the idea of understanding the country in the end is having this country momentum to achieve economic prosperity. And then the final one, which is the subjective world, and this is the final one, is more abstract, but I think is kind of beautiful and a little bit sad at the same time, because it's culture. The subjective world is the culture and its approach. So we have the East-West dichotomy for Western liberal democracies that is inherently hegemonic, because we understand the world as our language is structured in a hero-villain approach, right? So we are the heroes and they are the villains. So in order to prove that we are the heroes, we have to save the world. So this creates a constant class, and it's inherently hegemonic because Western liberal democracies want to become hegemonic and wants to, in a way, control and prove themselves, prove the point that they're heroes. And then, on the other hand, we have the People's Republic of China with this new Confucianism, the revitalization of Confucianism, and the core idea of this part is harmony, which is basically a non-intrusive cultural strengthening approach. That is, as long as you strengthen your culture without getting into mine, it said, in a way, cultural strengthening through economic prosperity, make your country work, and then your culture would be strengthened without trying to, for example, get into another country or try to impose, in a way, your culture to other country. And the second one is the self-rule approach, which is basically harmony makes or gives country this, or allows each country and each culture to be themselves. So there's room for everyone, right? There's no room to become hegemonic. And they have been clashing so bad because, in a way, we want to be hegemonic, they want to be harmonic, but in order to be harmonic, sometimes they have to become hegemonic. So this is some ideas that I want you to keep in mind. First of all, culturally, Western liberal democracies and the People's Republic of China are culturally tiered apart. There's a huge gap. We have to recognize it, we have to acknowledge, and also we have to take care whenever we encounter, doesn't mind, a human daily life encounter, or also at a political, economic, or diplomatic level. We are culturally tiered apart, so we have to make or create tools to overcome this. Then the second one, we have there's a big different role of the individual towards the states, but in the end, as I said before, there's some similar state and market results. So we come from different ideas, but in the end, in the practice, in reality, we just kind of like, we're coming up to a same point. And the third one, which is for me the most important, I would say, which is there's some new political approaches coming up in the next year. So there's something that I honestly think that is going to happen, that even if there's different understandings of democracy, in the end, whenever China is going to be developing, we're going to see how these different stages of democracy is gonna develop, and we're going to see how we can go from authoritarianism to neo-authoritarianism to a democracy without being from like a very starting point to democracy. And then finally, I just want to thank you. This is the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, go for it. here you can have my LinkedIn, and also you can have my email if you wanna write to me, or if you wanna see the thesis and you wanna go for it. It's in English. I will send it to you. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Alvaro. It's really an interesting topic. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Which element do you think, in terms of ideology, distances China from the Western ideology the most? Which is the biggest difference according to you?
So it depends on the field, right? But as I said, probably the element that kind of like tears them apart, right? The biggest break is the culture, but and that's something that is easy to say, right? But it's not that easy to justify. And we all understand that for sure we're culturally different, but this is because of a reason that is basically when it comes to states, the private experience of the states are cultures, and sometimes cultures they come from, of course, they have been forming, they have been building up from centuries ago. So sometimes this private experience, this way of understanding each other, because culture is not only the way you see yourself, but it's also the way you project yourself to the rest, clashes. And as we have seen, we are super hegemonic. We understand the world in a dichotomy, because I'm the hero, you're the villain, I'm good, you're bad, I'm poor, you're rich, right? We have this way of understanding the world. So when it comes to understanding the other, and when it comes to mutual understanding, we kind of see China as this villain, right? How they project it in the media, and they see us as another culture in the world that they have to develop themselves, as China has to develop itself too. So we have this dichotomy versus harmony clash going on.
Thank you for sharing with us your ideas, your project. And sorry, I called you Alvaro. I don't know why.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, maybe because of the surname. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. So now I'm pleased to introduce our second speaker. She's Sakura. She's currently finishing her master's degree in economics development and globalization at the University of Groningen. And her program mainly covers international economics and trade. And this is also what her research is focused on. And here in her studies, she examined the effect of administrative distance on China bilateral trade from 1996 onwards. So her thesis uses the gravity model to see how administrative distance can influence the amount of Chinese bilateral trade and how that changes over the years. So the floor is yours.
Yes, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'll start sharing my screen. So today I will be talking about how administrative distance influenced and it still is influencing Chinese bilateral trade. So a little bit about me. Chiara already introduced me, but I'm truly an Asia fanatic. That's why I also chose to do this topic for my master thesis. But my main research interests are international economics, FDI, trade and globalization, and that combined with geopolitics and the Chinese economy and society. So what I will be covering today is first why this research question I proposed is interesting to look at in first place. And then I will go over how administrative distance can actually be measured and captured. And then we, of course, need to know how can we then put that in a model. And it seems that the gravity model is the perfect, the prime example to use, to generate solutions for problems like these. And then after that, I will present the empirical results of my study and the implications that follow from that. So first, let's have a look at China. You're all interested in China. So why is specifically looking at Chinese bilateral trade so interesting? Well, Napoleon Bonaparte once said that let China sleep, for when she wakes and she will shake the world. I think we all know who this man is on the left-hand side, and basically it started with him because he initiated the new economic reform. And the changes in the institutions and the administrations that came along with this provide a very fruitful research area, because it was this shift from the agricultural economy to the more market-based economy. And that is why I wanted to look at this transition and see how this has developed over the years. So if we look at that in more recent times, so not end of the 70s, but maybe like from 96 onwards, we see that trade as a percentage of GDP versus the world, we see that China has boomed after 2001. What can be the cause, you may ask? Well, in 2001, they joined the WTO. So that has caused a peak in trade. But in more recent years, we see that the world on average is doing, it's still steadily growing, so to say, but China, it's declining a bit. So I was wondering, could this be due to geopolitical strains, the trade war, for instance, with the US, the fact that every country seems to become more democratic while China is still ruled by one party. So this observation stood out to me. We all, of course, know that even though China is still authoritarian and ruled by the CCP, they have undergone a massive transformation that's very obviously shown by this image. So how can these two contradicting things go together? You're not democratic on the one hand, but still you trade a lot, you develop very fast, and this goes against common knowledge in the academic literature. Well, the CCP is very prominent in China, but there are more developments in recent years which make me wonder how foreign countries look at this. For instance, the social credit system, the citizens being controlled by the government. Is that beneficial for trade? Is it nice to trade with a country who is so strict on their citizens? And why would you do that? Isn't that incurring more costs because there's so much uncertainty for a country with high quality institutions? So I was wondering how other countries perceive the quality of institutions in China and whether that influences the amount of trade they engage themselves with. So I was wondering as well, like, does opening up more, like that has been initiated by Deng Xiaoping, improve the quality of institutions? And when I look at the data by Kaufman, that is an index by the World Bank, measuring 6 dimensions, it seems rather stable, though China is not performing great, because the index ranges from -2.5 to +2.5, and you see that for most of the dimensions, they are below the zero line, and especially voice and accountability is an issue, and that has to do with the CCP, the social credit system, etc. Not a lot of freedom of speech, but we see that the government effectiveness is increasing a little bit. That can be due to the authoritarian regime. And then I looked at the main trading partners and their average scores throughout the years. And then we see China is like, there's quite a big distance between China and its main trading partners. The trading partners are considerably better positioned in terms of quality of institutions. So what is shown here is that there's quite a big administrative distance between them. And distance is usually perceived as bad. So why do these countries still trade so much with each other? And is maybe administrative distance a good thing? So to this end, I came up with 3 hypotheses. First of all, I hypothesized that administrative distance is expected to be negatively related to Chinese bilateral trade. Thereby it individually affects trade alongside geographical and political distance. So because distance is perceived as something bad, you don't want to have great distance. You want to be you want the institutions of your home country to be similar to those of China, because then it's predictable for you, there's less uncertainty, and that stimulates trade. Then hypothesis 1b, there I propose that China is expected to prefer trading with countries that possess higher quality institutions than China themselves. Why would China prefer that? That is because there are lower markups. So if China is, so to say, the weaker institutional country, then of course you want to trade with countries who have their administrations in order, because that ensures predictability, a stable government, following the rule of law, less corruption, etc. So of course you want to prefer trading with higher quality institutions. And then thirdly, when looking at the dynamic aspect, I propose that the administrative distance component, the importance of it, which has increased over time. So I believe that because we are more globalized right now, having bad quality institutions is more like prominently negatively influencing trade than it was, decades ago. So, okay, then we have these hypotheses, but how can you then measure administrative distance in the first place? So what I did here is, instead of gathering the data myself, I relied on the World Governance Indicators by the World Bank. And basically these are 6 dimensions. And what I did here is I used Euclidean distance techniques, which are shown by these formulas, to compose an index. And why I do that is because I can then capture administrative distance in a single number. Otherwise, I would have to like regress all the single dimensions on the trade. But then you're not capturing administrative distance, but then you're capturing the effect of corruption, or you capture the effect of government effectiveness. Administrative distance as a whole, it's a concept that has multiple dimensions. And that's why I needed to express that in a single number. And that I did by using these Euclidean distance techniques. So then I looked at what the average absolute administrative distance was between China and its trading partners. And then something interesting appeared. Because remember what happened here? In 2001, they joined WTO. But what we see is that the administrative distance increased. So that is a bit contradicting, because China becomes part of WTO. So you would think that there's more integration, the countries are coming closer together, but quite the opposite happened. So there was, instead of convergence, there seemed to be divergence for the administrative distance. So to explain this phenomenon, we want to use some methodology to pinpoint where the variation is coming from. And that model that can be used best is the gravity model. So the gravity model was first introduced by my fellow Dutchie Tinbergen in the early 1960s. And the hypothesis back then was very simple. Trade increases when the distance decreases or the economic size increases. So it's from Newton, so from physics, it was taken from physics. And basically, if you want to apply it to the context of this study, you get the following equation. And then I want to look at what is the beta 1? What is the effect of administrative distance? Is it positive or negative? And that is what I hypothesized that it was negative. But then, okay, you could just run this model, but there are some errors here. Specifically, there are some methodological errors, namely heteroscedasticity and the zero value observations. So you can't just run a simple OLS, but instead it is preferred that you apply a PML estimator. So that's a Poisson pseudo maximum likelihood estimator. And then if I apply it to the context of this study, I want to include both the administrative distance, but I also want to look at the relative position that China takes vis-a-vis its trading partner. And then I add in interaction term to moderate for the relationship. So what does this position mean? This is basically a dummy variable. So it takes the value of 1 if China is the relatively better country, and a value of 0 if the trading partner has the better institutions. And then if you look at the interaction term, you can see whether this position that China obtains has an influence. We'll get to that when I show the results. So the regression results, I won't bother you with this whole table, but basically these are the regression results from my thesis. And I ran several models, including time fixed effects, country fixed effects, and pair fixed effects, and I experimented with that. But what is the most important is that the effect of administrative distance is found to be significant, but it is of the opposite sign. So I was expecting that the beta 1 would be negative, but here you see it's all positive numbers. So how can I explain that? That is something I still have to explain in this presentation, but yeah, keep it in mind. It was the opposite of what I expected. So if countries are more administrative distant, so if they have a large difference between their institutions, that is good for trade. That is what the results show. And that is a bit confusing at first, but it can be explained. Because we have the moderator here, and we see that this is also all highly significant, or well, at least significant, but it's negative. So this has some implications, which I will get to later. I will show you an overview, which explains it more naturally. Then I also did I ran some models which look at the data from different time periods. So there you can see the effect over time. And what you see here is that the positive effect of administrative distance becomes smaller. So in 1996, it was way more positive than in 2019. So that means that the positive spillovers of of a great administrative distance start to diminish. And that is basically what I hypothesized. So that is good in a sense. Of course, I also had to run robustness checks to verify my results. And then for the Kohut-Singh index, I found the same results. So that was good. But for the other Euclidean distance technique, the results were not significant. So I couldn't say anything about that. But most important is, of course, what does it all mean? We want to think about how can we relate this academic study to our lives and our world. So the first and probably most important conclusion is that a greater administrative distance does not seem to limit trade with China. So even though corruption levels are high, there's an authoritarian regime in China, this does not affect our countries, the Western countries, to trade with China, because apparently there are still positive side effects of trading with China, and the administrative distance is not an obstacle. Secondly, is that China prefers to trade with high quality institutions, as was expected. And thirdly, over time, the positive effects of administrative distance fade. So what I showed you was that the number in 1996 was more positive than in 2019. Of course, I also had to include control variables such as the geographic distance and the economic size, the political distance, and those behave normally. So that is very reassuring, because that, of course, makes your study more robust. If everything were to behave differently, then China is really, well, different than all of the other countries. So that would need more investigation. But now that we see that only administrative distance behaves differently, we could really infer some conclusions about that dimension only. So to that end, basically the results indicate that you have to ask yourself the question, does China possess the relatively higher quality institutions? If that is the case, that is mostly with countries in Africa, for instance, who are even lower quality institutional areas. If that is the case, so China is relatively better, then the absolute administrative distance negatively impacts bilateral trade. And why is that? That is because the moderator is bigger than the value of the administrative distance beta. So of course, if the administrative distance is very big, but China is relatively better, that means that the trading partner is really, really bad at institutional quality. So then China is also like, no, I don't want to trade with you because your institutions are so weak. So yeah, when countries possess institutions worse than China's, being substantially worse decreases the amount of trade more than being marginally worse. And that is possibly due to higher markups. Well, if it's the case that China does not possess the relatively better institutions, so the trading partners such as Australia, that is a very strong institutional quality, then China wants to trade with those countries who are very administrative dissimilar to them. So a high administrative distance, because that means that they are way better. They have a solid functioning of the government and the administrations. So then China can benefit from the lower markups, and that makes the greater administrative distance desired. So I was wondering, so what your thoughts on this are, and whether China can proceed with its chosen path, so very authoritarian and non-democratic one-party rule, or do you think that eventually it will have to recalibrate and become more similar to its main trading partners, so become more democratic and follow the rule of law, have less corruption? So yeah, I'm wondering whether you think how this will unfold in the future. And yeah, if you want to read the whole thesis, you can text me on LinkedIn or send me an email, and then I'd be happy to share the thesis. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sakura, for sharing with us your research. It's really interesting. The model you propose seems so complicated, but at the same time, you can see concretely, thanks numbers, data, functions, what administrative distance is. Yeah, you put that question in your presentation. What's your point of view? Do China will have to change?
Yeah, I think that the issue is that China is, that's a different area of study, but that China is so deeply rooted in global value change that a lot of countries are simply dependent on China. So at some point, you have to give and take. So I think that I'm more in line with, you have two camps, basically. You have Roderick, the literature by Roderick, and literature by Acemoglu. And I think that Roderick is more right. So he proposes that institutions indeed do matter, but they can't, there's like a trilemma. You can't have free markets, democracy, and like a stable functioning institutions. So that doesn't go hand in hand. So I think China is the prime example of that they very much utilize capitalism, and they are able to use free markets very well, but they don't have their democratic values in order, so to say. So I think China will not give in, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your interest point of view. Thank you. And now I leave the floor to Anabela, Santiago. Anabela is a PhD student of public policy at the University of Aveiro in Portugal. She earned a master's degree in Chinese studies from the same university, and her dissertation currently focuses on the Chinese stance toward global health governance. Her research is exploring this very contemporary topic of the geopolitics of the Health Silk Road. Specifically, her dissertation focuses on two aspects: the Chinese health reforms since 2003 and the policies of the Healthy China 2030 plan. So Anabela, it's a pleasure to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chiara. Good morning, everyone. I will share my presentation. You can see it now?
Yeah.
Okay. So as Chiara mentioned, I am a PhD student of public policies. So I have to choose one specific domain for the public policy study, and I decided to focus on the health public policies, and I chose the Chinese case as my case study because I already I had a previous background in Chinese studies, so I decided to focus more on this specific aspect. And today I will present you a brief presentation about the Chinese contribution to the health global governance by analyzing specifically the role of health Silk Road. So the structure of my presentation will be based in three main points. First of all, I will try to describe the concept of global health governance, which is the central concept of my thesis. Then I will focus on the Chinese health reforms and the Healthy China 2030 plan, because in order to better understand the strategy of the Chinese government towards the global health governance, we need first of all to understand the successive reforms that occurred in the recent decades in the inner health system in China. And finally, I will focus on the Health Silk Road and its role in all this Chinese diplomacy. So what do we understand by health governance? In the literature, there is a wide range of definitions, and it's not easy to choose one of them because it depends on the author's perspective and the approach that we give to the theme of health governance. But I think this definition of Fiedler to me is quite accurate and simple to understand. And Fiedler defines the global health governance as the use of formal and informal institutions, rules and processes by states, intergovernmental organizations and non-state actors to deal with challenges related to health that require a cross-border collective action to address them effectively. So what would I like to stress out in this definition is that to be able to speak about global health governance, we should have in mind two central aspects. One of them is the use of formal but also informal institutions of state and non-state actors, because if we don't have the participation of the civil society, of non-state actors and informal institutions, we are not talking about governance, we are talking about government only. And this is the main difference between the concept of government and governance. And besides this, we also need a cross-border collective action, because when we speak about global health governance, we are speaking about issues related to health that can't be addressed by only one specific country or territory. We are speaking about issues that involve international problems of public health and so on, like the current pandemic that we are facing. So these two aspects need to be present in order to speak and to use the term, the expression global health governance. As I said, there are many authors that are already studying this concept, but one of them that I particularly appreciate is Ilona Kikush, that is a researcher who is studying these specific terms, and she came to us with three political dimensions of the global health governance. And these expressions that we are seeing, global governance for health, global health governance, and governance for global health, despite it seems apparently the same thing, there are slight differences between these three spheres of action. And the main differences are related to the focus point of the policies, and also to the agents that are involved in the decision making. So when we speak about global governance for health, we are speaking about a broader approach to health, that is health in all policies and in all sectors. The starting point is not the health system itself, but the social, economic, and political determinants of health. When we speak about governance for global health, now in this sphere, we are speaking about not supranational level of governance, but two national and regional levels of health governance. And here, the focus point of these decisions linked to policies are the global health strategies. So what each nation, what each government is doing in order to prevent and to improve public health as a whole. And last, we have the global health governance, which is the concept that I am studying. And the focus point of this sphere is the health equity and disease control. And here we are speaking about entities that are specifically related to health and not entities from other sectors of activity. And it is important when we speak about global health governance, more and more, not only in Europe, but also in Asia and in other parts of the globe, we are more and more focusing on health in all policies. So that is why it is very important to be aware that there are social determinants when we are speaking about health. So health is influenced not only by the healthcare system itself, but also by education, the neighborhood and environment, by social contexts and economic stability. All these determinants are affecting the way the governments take decisions related to health in their countries, and then it will have also a big influence in the way the global governance for health is addressed also. So this is the background, the framework that I am studying in order to be able to understand what is the Chinese position in all these. And so moving on to the Chinese health reforms, I decided to study a period from 2003 until nowadays in my thesis, because we are speaking about a period in which Chinese faced a change in its leadership, and also the year of the appearance of the first SARS-CoV-1. And so 2003 marks somehow a turning point in the health approach in China. The first big reform after this year occurred in 2009, and this reform was essentially based in the purpose of having a more equitable and affordable primary care services in China. So the role of the government in this period was highly empowered, because I should say that in China, the main reforms in health system already switched between a more market-centered approach and a more government-centered approach. So here we are somehow back to the Mao's period, in which the health sector benefits highly from the government intervention. And so what are the main objectives of this reform? Essentially a universal health coverage, because by that time, a high percentage of Chinese citizens didn't have access to basic health care due to high costs of the health care services. And the main goal is to spread out this coverage in health, in order to, in 2020, obtain universal health coverage. This was the main goal. And also the increase in health insurance policies, because many citizens were not covered by any health insurance by that time. And as I said, the reducing of costs and a higher efficiency of primary care services. In fact, Chinese people were by that time very dependent, and they still are very dependent on the secondary care services, very dependent on the hospital's network and then emergencies services, and no health system can function well if this happens. The primary care services should be well distributed, and population should have access to them. Otherwise, the health system doesn't work well. And this was a big problem. In 2013, there is another reform, and this reform is very in line with the previous one. And so the guidelines are kept, the main guidelines, and we see that the government had a specific attention to the decreasing in the costs of medication and into the regulation of drugs, because this was also a big problem, as the pharmaceutical companies were very, how can I say, pressing the practitioners, especially the general practitioners, to prescribe sometimes drugs, mostly antibiotics, that were not needed. And so the health system was very dependent on the drugs companies. And the government tries in 2013 to regulate these drugs markets, and to have more transparency in this field. And then the continuation of the hospital network reform, in order to build better facilities, to acquire more advanced equipment, but also to have a management of hospitals who is shared by the government and by private entities. So it is a mixed management, and not only hospitals in the hands of the privates or only in the hands of the state. Another great program that is yet influencing the way Chinese government rules the health sector is the Healthy China 2030. This is a statal program that was issued in 2015 by President Xi Jinping, and the main goals of this program are to align the Chinese health system with other European and non-European health systems by learning with the high standards and practices of other systems. And the main goals of this plan are the healthy living, first of all, obviously, the optimization of the health services. Here, once again, the primary care services as the central point of attention of these policies, the improvement of health security, not only in health itself, but also extended to the healthy eating, to the value chains of the production of drugs and also of food. So this is a point very curious, because here health is once again linked to other sectors, and it can't be dissociated from, for example, the agriculture, the production of food, and the production of medication. So moving on, the building of healthy environment. Here, health also related to the environment problems, because as China is facing a huge urbanization rate in these last decades, the problems of disease caused by environment-related disease and problems are growing. So it is also a central point of attention of the Chinese government, the environment-related diseases. Then the development of healthcare industry, the building of supportive mechanisms, namely financing mechanisms. In fact, China we can see that some Asian banks and Chinese banks have appeared in recent years in order to give loans to the health sector and to support the development of some policies and investments, and the strengthening of the organization and implementation. Those are the main guidelines of Healthy China 2030. And I would like to stress out that this Chinese plan for health is very, very important in the sense that it aligns the Chinese strategy with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for health. And the main guidelines that it follows is the health for all and all for health. So, as you can see in this poster of propaganda issued by the Chinese government, this is a model that they are following, and which is very in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So health should be present in all policies, not only in the health sector policies, but also in other areas like the environmental one, like the education, in order to to give people health literacy, to avoid going to the healthcare system in the last minutes, and trying to prevent disease instead of curing them. So the prevention of health is also very important here. Moving on then to the role of the Health Silk Road. The Health Silk Road is a branch of the Global Chinese Initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative, and somehow she gets a more proeminent relevance with this pandemic, after the pandemic. But already in 2015, the concept of Health Silk Road was coined by the President Xi Jinping, but in formal terms, it was in 2017 that the concept was adopted in the Beijing communique of the Belt and Road Health Cooperation and Health Silk Road. And in this year, the Chinese government signed with the World Health Organization a memorandum of understanding, in which they compromise to engage in the building of this Health Silk Road across the countries that are part of the Belt and Road Initiative. This document is easily accessed in the internet, and it traces the basic guidelines for the Health Silk Road implementation. What can I say about this concept? The main areas of intervention are the development of cooperation mechanisms, the infectious disease control and prevention, the capacity building and personal training, here especially in what refers to general practitioners, the medical assistance and emergencies, and health systems and policies. This Health Silk Road concept is mainly addressing the Chinese global strategy, and not the internal strategy as the Healthy China 2030 plan does. So here we are moving on to the global behavior of China towards this matter. What are the achievements so far of the Health Silk Road? Before the pandemic, the main visible achievement was the creation of many forums and many global conferences below the theme of health governance. Some of them occurred in China, other ones in other parts of Asia, but this was the main achievement. Nowadays, we can still observe a higher engagement into scientific research and international scientific cooperation. In fact, if we look at the statistics, there is a growing number of international scientific teams that integrate Chinese researchers. And this is a positive signal of understanding and of Chinese willing to learn from other countries and partners. High investment in areas such as biopharma and biotechnology. This is quite visible if we look at statistics of the numbers of biotechnological companies that were created in China, especially in the last 2 years. The food and drug security as a priority, as I already mentioned, very linked to the European concept of healthy eating, healthy living. So the Chinese government is more and more committed to ensure that there is a total transparency between the farmer producing of the raw materials for the production of food until the food is distributed and arrives to the final consumer. This is a very recent worry of the Chinese government, and the point in which they are focusing very much. The creation of financing institutions in order to support the mechanisms and the policies to be implemented and to go on with the reform of the hospital networks, and the continuation of the reforms in its inner health system. Finally, just some brief considerations regarding the Healthy China 2030. It is an internal plan that has still many challenges to be addressed, because in fact, China is facing not only a high urbanization rate and all the consequences derived from the change in Chinese consumption habits and eating habits, but also China is facing an aging population and all the related problems in health that are brought by this aging population, and also high resistance of some antibiotics. And so there are many internal problems that still need to be solved in order to move on and to be a great player in the global sphere, because no one can be a relevant player in global order if the problems internally are not solved. So China is really dedicated to solving its internal health problems. I think that the cooperation in scientific health cooperation will be a constant and will increase even more with these pandemic effects, because there is a huge need of cooperation in health sector of all nations, and the Health Silk Road is just one tool of this Chinese health diplomacy. It is not the only one, but it is the flagship of the Chinese health diplomacy. Thank you so much. I hope it was clear and interesting for you. And if you have any questions, I am here to reply to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anabela. It was really interesting. So yeah, I have a question. So how did the health reforms affect the fight against poverty?
Sorry, could you repeat, please?
Yeah, sure. How did the health reforms affect the fight against poverty?
Well, one big topic of of health and poverty is because a Chinese population spent in, for example, when the first reform was carried out, they spent a huge budget of their family in health expenditures, and this was a factor of poverty in the families, in the Chinese families, because a huge percentage of Chinese citizens don't even go to the doctor because they don't have the means for paying the costs of healthcare. And there was a big evolution in this sense, because nowadays almost 90% of Chinese population has access to basic healthcare services. This was not the case 20 years ago. And I think in this field, China is moving very rapidly to eradicate the poverty in what health is concerned.
Thank you, thank you. So now I have a question for all the speakers. I think that we maybe we can maybe start from Gustavo, then Sakura, and then move to Anabela. So the question is, what was the most challenging aspect of your research?
Well, I think the most challenging aspect it was I think our framework itself, because sometimes when you're working just with very abstract ideas, and of course there's data, but the most important thing is like the arguments and the logic process that you follow to actually achieve a reasoning in the end. I think that was the most challenging because it took me quite a long time to go from an abstract idea of what I wanted to do, like my intentions, and actually creating the concept framework. And also probably the second, the second thing that it was maybe like the most challenging part, it was getting to some high quality data or some high quality texts about Chinese political theory, because sometimes everything's in Chinese and I will start learning Chinese because hopefully I'm graduating but this year, but yeah, I don't know Chinese, so for me it was a little bit challenging to actually find texts that actually I can understand and they were high quality and reliable.
Yeah, but you did a great job, so
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. So Sakura, will you share with us?
Yeah, for me, I think the most challenging part was, well, first there were a lot of econometric things which needed to be resolved. But secondly, it's because you're kind of biased, because I grew up in a free country and you have to try and understand why a country like China, who is so opposing, which has such opposing values, can still receive such a boost in trade. So I think that was also pretty challenging to not let your own ideas and thoughts how the world should look like be influencing your research.
Thank you. And Anabela, what's your thought?
Well, for me, I think it was a bit of the two things that Gustavo and Sakura said, because in the first stage, I found it very difficult to pick up the parts that I would like to bring together. And there is a wide range of literature, and choosing the right one and knowing the framework that I had to apply to my research was a bit difficult at the beginning. And well, although not being influenced by the ideas that I already have about China, and also the news in the media that nowadays are quite influenced by other interests, and it is difficult to choose the right sources of information and to take a neutral position sometimes.
Yeah, you're right, definitely. So we are running out of time. Thank you, Sakura Debier, Gustavo Álvarez, and Anabela Santiago for sharing with us this interesting research. I'm really sure that hard work will pay off. Thanks to all of you who are here today. Thanks for having joined us. And last but not least, a huge thanks to the EG members. Thank you for the hard work, the passion, and the commitment that you put in what you do. We did a great job this year, and great things gonna come in the future. So thank you.